Along the shore near Misenum, in the last hour before noon, a secretary sat with a wax tablet balanced against his knee, waiting for the next sentence. The man dictating to him lay on a couch in the shade of a portico, one arm resting behind his head, and he had already been at this for hours, the way he was most days, reading a passage aloud to himself, pausing, then giving the secretary a line to copy down, before moving on to the next scroll in a stack that never seemed to shrink. Gaius Plinius Secundus, known to history as Pliny the Elder, was 55 years old that August, and by every account that survives of him, he treated a day without reading or writing as a day wasted. He ate lightly, so that eating would cost him less time. He was carried between appointments in a litter, rather than walking, so that the journey itself could be spent with a book open in his lap. He commanded the western fleet of the Roman navy from this harbour, and he had reached it after decades of service under 3 emperors. But on this particular afternoon, none of that was on his mind. He was simply working the way he always worked, when his sister came to find him and told him to look at the sky. This is Earth Curiosa. What she was pointing at, across the bay, was a column of something rising from the direction of Vesuvius, a mountain that had never, in the memory of anyone alive, done anything of note. It did not look at first like smoke or fire. It rose in a single trunk, straight and pale, and then spread outward at its top into a shape Pliny would later compare to an umbrella pine, the kind of tree native to his childhood home near Lake Como, its crown flattening out above a long bare stem. He had spent his life writing about the natural world in exhaustive, patient detail, 37 volumes covering everything from the behaviour of elephants to the properties of stone. And here, without warning, was something his existing categories did not obviously contain. His reaction was not alarm, it was interest. He called for a light boat to be prepared so that he could sail closer and see the marvel unfolding in front of him properly. The same instinct that had shaped every other day of his working life, only now aimed at the base of an active volcano rather than the pages of a book. He was still giving orders about the boat when a second message reached him, this one considerably more urgent than his own curiosity. It came from a woman named Rectina, the wife of a friend whose house stood near the foot of the mountain, close enough that the only way out was by sea. She was asking to be rescued. The errand changed shape immediately. Pliny abandoned the idea of a single vessel for a better look, and instead ordered the launch of the fleet's larger warships, quadriremes built for open water, crewed and provisioned for a rescue rather than a sightseeing trip. He went aboard himself, which he did not have to do. A man of his rank could reasonably have sent officers in his place, and remained at Misenum dictating notes from second-hand reports. Instead he sailed with the fleet, and as the ships crossed the bay towards the coastline, everyone else was fleeing. He kept working in the only way he knew how, watching the eruption closely enough to describe its changing shape and colour to the officer taking notes behind him, treating the unfolding disaster, for as long as he could, as data. The closer the ships came to shore, the harder that became to sustain. Ash and pumice began falling onto the decks, lightly at first, and then thickly enough to gather in the folds of the sailors' clothing, and the stones grew hotter the nearer they drew to the mountain. Fragments of rock, some large enough to be dangerous on their own, were rolling down the slopes and piling up along the beach, narrowing the places where a ship might safely land. The sea itself was behaving strangely, drawing back and leaving stretches of shore exposed in a way that worried the crew as much as anything falling from the sky. It was the helmsman, watching all of this, who suggested they turn back while there was still time. Pliny would not. According to his nephew's account, written decades later from testimony gathered soon after the event, he told the helmsman that fortune favours the brave, and ordered the ships on towards Stabiae instead, a town further down the coast where another friend of his, a man named Pompeii, was waiting. By the time they arrived, the wind that had carried them there, favourable for the crossing, had turned against any attempt to leave again by the same route, and Pomponianus's household was already in open panic. baggage half loaded onto carts, servants moving between rooms, trying to decide what could be saved. Pliny did not share their urgency, or did not show it at least. He embraced his frightened friend, and then, by way of calming him, did something that reads almost strangely today. He asked for a bath to be drawn, and afterwards sat down to dinner as though the evening were an ordinary one. Vesuvius could be seen from the house, throwing up flames and broad sheets of fire against the darkening sky, and distant villages were visibly burning on the slopes below it. Pliny told the household these were simply bonfires left alight by farmers who had fled their homes in a hurry, an explanation that cost him nothing to offer, and gave his friends something steadier to hold on to than the truth. After the meal, he went to rest, and by every account, his rest was genuine rather than performed. He was a heavy man, and his breathing, already known to be loud, could be heard clearly by the servants stationed outside his door, rising and falling in the kind of laboured rhythm that suggested some chronic weakness in his chest. He slept through what must have been a considerable stretch of the night, while outside, in the courtyard, pumice continued to fall and accumulate, rising high enough against the walls that the household eventually woke him out of a genuine concern that the building itself might collapse, or that the door would be sealed shut by the depth of the debris gathering against it. They made their decision together, weighing one danger against another. To stay inside risked being buried beneath a structure no longer built to withstand what was piling against its walls, while to go outside meant walking directly into a rain of falling stone. They chose to go outside and tied pillows to their heads with cloth, a crude but entirely reasonable defence against the debris still falling around them, and made their way towards the shore in what little light there was. The sea, when they reached it, was too violent for any boat to launch. Waves that would ordinarily have carried a vessel safely out into the bay were instead crashing against the shoreline already half buried, and there was no way through by water, just as there had been no way through when the eruption began. Pliny asked for a sheet to be spread on the ground and laid down on it. He asked twice for a cold water to drink, complaining, it was said, of thirst rather than fear. Around him, sulphurous fumes were thickening in the air, the same fumes that were driving others from the beach entirely, and whether it was those fumes filling a chest already weakened by years of laboured breathing, or the sheer physical strain of the walk down from the house, or some combination the ancient sources cannot fully separate, no one can say with certainty even now. He was found 2 days later, once the ash had settled enough for the household to return and search for him. His body, by the account that survives, showed no visible wound or injury. He looked, his nephew was told, more like a man asleep than a man who had died in the middle of a catastrophe, which is perhaps the detail that has unsettled readers of this story for nearly 2,000 years, more than any description of fire or ash could manage on its own. None of this would be known in anything like this detail if his nephew, 17 years old and safely across the bay at Misenum that night, had not chosen, a quarter of a century later, to write it all down. A historian named Tacitus had asked him for an account of his uncle's death, intending to use it in a larger history of the period, and the younger Pliny responded with 2 letters so precise in their sequence of events that they remain, to this day, the closest thing the ancient world produced to an eyewitness record of how a volcanic eruption actually unfolds, hour by hour, from the first strange cloud to the final collapse on a darkened beach. Historians have noted, reasonably, that 25 years is a long time for memory to hold its shape without some smoothing at the edges, and that a nephew writing about a much-loved uncle's final hours has every reason to render those hours as bravely as the truth allows. That caution is fair, and worth stating plainly rather than setting aside. But the broad shape of the account, the calm, the bath, the pillows, the collapse on the shore, has held up against nearly 2 centuries of modern volcanological study of the very layers of ash and pumice that buried Pompeii and Stabiae that night. And today geologists still use his name for what happened. An eruption that sends a column of ash miles into the sky before it collapses outwards is called, in scientific literature published anywhere in the world, a Plinian eruption. after a man who tried to understand one from close enough to die in it. Visitors who stand today in the Forum at Pompeii, looking north toward the mountain, are looking at roughly the same view Pliny was trying to rid from the deck of an approaching warship 19 centuries ago, a shape rising against the sky that resembled nothing he had ever catalogued. He spent his life believing that careful, close observation was how the natural world gave up its secrets, and on the one night it mattered most, it was the very thing that carried him too close to a secret that had no patience left to give. This story is just one chapter. Discover more remarkable places at earthcuriosa.com.